as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation, referenced and described in court filings in a pending matter in the Southern District of Florida.
The person currently supervising both of those investigations and possible prosecutions is Merrick Garland, who is also in charge of supervising the 115,000 people who work in the Department of Justice, including the 35,000 people working at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the 34,000 people working in the Bureau of Prisons, the 9,848 people working in the Drug Enforcement Administration, the 5,400 people working in the U.S. Marshal Service, and on and on and on. Merrick Garland has Justice Department employees answering to him all over the world, working 24 hours a day. And now, Jack Smith has been appointed by the Attorney General to spend all day, every day, concentrating on one thing: the investigation and possible prosecution of Donald Trump. Jack Smith is not replacing someone else who was in charge of both of those investigations. There was no dedicated prosecutor in charge of both of those investigations, and now there is. And Donald Trump is afraid of that. That is correctly, deeply disturbing to Donald Trump and his acolytes. Merrick Garland insisted today that the appointment of Jack Smith would involve no delay in these investigations, and there is actually the possibility that at certain points in the investigation, it could speed things up because Jack Smith can make the decisions that previously had to get in line for the Attorney General's attention, which, as the department organizational chart shows, is scattered literally all over the world. Merrick Garland has a civil rights division to worry about every day, an antitrust division, a tax division, an environment and natural resources division, and Jack Smith doesn't. Jack Smith's focus is on one target all day, every day. And that target is going to have even more trouble trying to fall asleep in Florida tonight than he did last night. Mr. Smith issued a written statement today saying, "I intend to conduct the assigned investigations and any prosecutions that may result from them independently and in the best traditions of the Department of Justice. The pace of the investigations will not pause or flag under my watch. I will exercise independent judgment and will move the investigations forward expeditiously and thoroughly to whatever outcome the facts and the law dictate." Jack Smith, a name a fiction writer would choose to convey humility, now stands at the threshold of becoming the most famous and most important prosecutor in human history. Leading off our discussion tonight is Andrew Weissman, former FBI General Counsel and former Chief of the Criminal Division, the Eastern District of New York. He's professor of practice at NYU Law School. And also with us, Paul Butler, law professor at Georgetown University and a former federal prosecutor. They are both MSNBC legal analysts. And Harry Litman is with us, a former U.S. attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Andrew Weissman, 2 points. First, share with us what you know about Jack Smith. And secondly, are you hoping that on the plane back across the Atlantic Ocean, he is reading your 169-page pros memo, as they call it, prosecutor's memo, outlining all the pros and cons of prosecuting Donald Trump in this case?
So I've known Jack for decades. I was the chief of the criminal division when he started in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and with a group of really a tremendous class that he came in with, one of whom is actually serving as Lisa Monaco's principal deputy, Marshall Miller. So I have a feeling that may have been a way in which Jack's name came to their attention as a really good prospect for this job. And Jack, as you noted, has had all sorts of positions that make him really perfect for this job in the sense of his experience. He's a career prosecutor. He's completely apolitical. In public integrity, they prosecuted Democrats and Republicans. They don't care if you committed a crime. It doesn't matter what party you're in or whether you're in no party. So all of that is a really good sign. The other thing to know about Jack is I worked for Robert Mueller, and one of his phrases when he thought that you were wringing your hands too much was he would say, "Stop playing with your food," meaning, it's important to be thorough and make sure you're anticipating things, but not to a fault. You can't just, slow things down to use that as an excuse not to move forward. Jack does not suffer from that. For people who are worried about this slowing down, I have the exact opposite reaction. And Lawrence, I completely agree with you, not just because of systemic view, which is that he is going to be able to answer things and move things along a lot quicker than having to go through the huge bureaucracy of the department. But his very nature is to move things along speedily. That's how he was trained in the Eastern District, and that's sort of who he is, very much a can-do person. So I think that's all, for the good. And in terms of our model prosecution memo, yes, of course, I'd love it if he read it. I'm pretty sure he's reading lots of binders of evidence that we'd all love to get our hands on. And if there is an indictment, we will see a lot of that evidence.
Paul Butler, Jack Smith also. I'd like to hear from you about him. But, I read Andrew's Pross memo. I think it was about 2 hours, and that was to make sure I was doing it very, very carefully. It brings you 100% up to speed on the documents case. The January 6th case is another matter. Andrew hasn't written one of those yet. So, but the idea that there's some kind of delay involved in having someone come in at the top of this, where everyone doing the work is already doing that work, strikes me as a misunderstanding of what it is to come in at this level, at this supervisory level, with all the work that has been done.
Yeah, I think that's right. So Jack Smith was the chief of the public integrity section, where I worked as a trial attorney. And those career prosecutors are steadfastly apolitical, but there's a reason we wanted to work public corruption cases. My colleagues believe that nobody should be above the law, especially top government officials. And Lawrence, Jack Smith could have cashed out his experience as a prosecutor for a cushy job at a law firm. It's revealing that he's remained in government service as a prosecutor for 3 decades. And what I think is especially worrying for Trump's defense attorneys is that Jack Smith directed the prosecution of a former CIA officer for mishandling national security and obstruction of justice. That person was convicted, and was sentenced to prison. So Jack Smith's got a things to do list, a very long things to do list. But I agree with Andrew that he will act sooner rather than later. Merrick Garland acknowledged that what triggered this appointment was Trump's announcement that he's running for president. So I think that inevitably creates some pressure on the special counsel to decide sooner rather than later if Trump will be charged. And to your point, Lawrence, for what? January 6th? And it's that the violence of Insurrection Day, or the fake elector scheme, or Mar-a-Lago, or both?
Harry Lipman, the evidence is so overwhelming in the documents case that you have William Barr tonight on PBS saying he believes the evidence is there. There's enough evidence there for a prosecution. So that's Donald Trump's Attorney General's view of the situation. You've got Jack Smith working in Europe at The Hague. What are the chances that he makes the life decision that he wants to drop everything he's doing there, to fly back to the United States, to look at a bunch of investigative material in 2 investigations of Donald Trump, to conclude that there is no reason to proceed with any prosecution there?
Look, if you mean has he taken the case only because he's concluded that he'll indict, I don't think that's right. I mean, the evidence is very strong. I commend, by the way, the Just Security memo by Andrew and Ryan Goodman and others. But I think when he says, I'm going to give it a true look and I'll be ready to say no indictment if that's where the facts and law leads, he means that. On the other hand, the excitement of the appointment, and he's someone who's been everywhere in the DOJ, also the international community, also a state DA's office, is for going forward and prosecuting. So I think he would relish that prospect. but I don't think he's prejudged it and said, I'm flying back because I know we're going to be having USA versus Donald Trump within the next couple months. He will give it an independent look first and foremost.
Andrew Weissman, Donald Trump had a bunch of incoherent things to say around this subject tonight, and a giant pack of lies around the subject involving apparently every previous president stealing classified documents when they left. But there's also one person who's really on his mind in a way that seems to be driving him crazy. Someone named Andrew Weissman. Let's listen to this.
As you know, just about the top person, one of the top people in the Justice Department, Lisa Monaco, a major Trump hater, major, I mean, beyond belief, is in charge of the case, and she's totally controlled by Andrew Weissman. Do you ever hear the name Andrew Weissman? I think you did. In this room, you did. Bad person, bad guy, but he's an even bigger Trump hater. Sounds like a fair deal so far. Do you agree?
Andrew, do you agree?
So, I find that obviously that Lisa knows what she's in for. Merrick Garland knows what he's in for. And Jack you don't sign up for this if you don't have a very thick skin and you let that roll off your back. People who are subjects or targets of a criminal investigation generally don't like prosecutors that have all sorts of things to say, but true and untrue. And you learn to live with that and still learn that the due process of law, that's what you're sworn to do. That is something that Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, and Jack Smith are steeped in terms of their oath of office and who they are. And this is just part of like the equation here. And I just would point out that Jack Smith has a really thick skin. He's been doing this for a long time, and that is something I'm not worried at all that he is going to be distracted or become emotional or in any way react to those kinds of attacks. Obviously, nothing prepares you for the onslaught that he is going to receive in certain parts of the media. But I think as much as you can be, he is equipped to deal with that.
Lawrence Tribe tweeted, if a special counsel was to be appointed, I can think of no one better suited than Jack Smith. Vast experience prosecuting public corruption cases, treacherous national security violations, and crimes against humanity. Absorbs complex facts instantly. Perfect for Donald Trump. Paul Butler, we've got unanimous agreement on Jack Smith being the right person to be in charge of this. There has been some debate over the course of the day about why do this, and there has been some serious misstatements about this, saying that Merrick Garland acknowledged a conflict of interest, which he absolutely did not. He said there are extraordinary circumstances, and the provision for this includes conflict of interest or extraordinary circumstances. And he's saying it is an extraordinary circumstance that this involves a former president who is now a candidate for president, and that informed his thinking about bringing in Jack Smith for this. But if you leave the term special counsel aside for the moment, there was no one supervising both of these possible prosecutions of Donald Trump, and now there is. And whether that person has the title of special counsel or not doesn't seem terribly important.
Exactly right. So first, remember, it's a special counsel, not an independent counsel. So the decision to bring charges is still ultimately Merrick Garland's. This is about the appearance of justice. The concern was that if both Biden and Trump run for president, it might look to some people like the Biden administration is trying to take down his political opponent. That wouldn't actually be the case because the attorney general will still make the decision without consulting the president in any event.
And Harry, there's another piece of this, which is Merrick Garland knows that the Republican House is going to try to drag him up to testify as often as possible. And they're going to want to ask him questions about the investigation and prosecution of Donald Trump. And of course, he would refuse to answer those questions because it's an ongoing investigation. But now there's one other layer of his refusal to answer the questions, which is he's not actually supervising the cases.
Yeah, and so it's an excellent point. Remember, the last time around with Mueller, he was under tremendous pressure within the department, and the department bent a little. Rod Rosenstein actually gave information over to the Congress. They're going to want Garland to do the same thing, and he will be steadfast in saying no way, and something that will make it easier is the independence of Jack Smith. But he knows, and this was one of the arguments against appointment, it doesn't matter how strong Smith's reputation is, how nonpartisan he is. They've already come out of the box. You heard Trump call him a Trump hater, and there's been, you heard Marjorie Taylor Greene say impeach Garland. That will happen no matter what. They're already, I'm sure, combing through, his library records and his dating past. It's going to happen, but hopefully there's a middle ground here that still remains in the country that we'll see. Garland bent over backwards to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and that's going to arm him even as the slings and arrows come his way from the new Republican Congress.
Yeah, a lot of people are making the mistake today of saying they're doing this to try to gain credibility with Trump Republicans. No, they're not. They've given up completely on that with those people. Yeah. They're doing this because Merrick Garland believes that it fits a situation for a special counsel. And if they're trying to appear fair to anyone, it's that swing voter person who's not attached to Donald Trump and not attached to the Democratic Party either. We have to squeeze in a break here. When we come back, we will look at the crimes Jack Smith will be investigating and Donald Trump's possible role in those crimes.
Is truth. There comes a point when opposing realities
Q is a movement.
part of the Turning Point documentary series.
The special counsel will conduct parts of the first investigation I just mentioned. The investigation into whether any person or entity unlawfully interfered with the transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election, or with the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6. This does not include prosecutions that are currently pending in the District of Columbia or future investigations and prosecutions of individuals for offenses committed while they were physically present on the Capitol grounds on January 6. Those investigations and prosecutions will remain under the authority of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia.
When Jack Smith was the chief of the Public Integrity Section at the Justice Department, he told the New York Times, "If I were the sort of person who could be cowed, I know we should bring this case, I know the person did it, but we could lose and that would look bad, I would find another line of work." Andrew Weissman, I'm concentrating on what the Attorney General said about the January 6th investigation, because this is a special prosecutor who has been brought in specifically because Donald Trump is involved in these cases. This means very clearly, if we didn't know it already, that Donald Trump is obviously a criminal target of the investigation of the activities that led up to January 6th and the attempt to overturn and overthrow the election.
I guess I would say that this statement, combined with what we know about the investigation, makes that abundantly clear. I do think that there are other subjects and targets, because this is an incredibly broad mandate that he has been given, because it basically means not just Donald Trump, but any of his conspirators or aiders and abettors are all within the ambit of Jack Smith's purview. And that's just the January 6th investigation. So it's all aspects of that come under his purview, except for the sort of more low-level people who are carrying out Donald Trump's orders. And that leaves entirely aside that he also has jurisdiction over the so-called documents case involving the documents at Mar-a-Lago and the obstruction of justice of either of those two investigations, which is also within his ambit. In other words, any conduct that could be viewed as obstruction of either the January 6th investigation or the documents case is also something that he has purview to investigate.
And Paul Butler, there's also that standard line in the appointment document that the Justice Department released today saying that, oh, by the way, go ahead and pursue anything else that you might find as you're conducting this investigation. And if you want to, or if necessary, you can farm that out to a local U.S. attorney in whose jurisdiction that might have occurred.
And that happens quite frequently. Lawrence, I think that in addition to perusing the hundreds of pages of grand jury testimony regarding both January 6th and Mar-a-Lago, Special Counsel Smith on the plane ride back to the States will be watching some videos, looking at the roadmap provided by the House January 6th panel, which clearly laid out a case for obstruction of an official proceeding of Congress and conspiracy to defraud the American people in connection with January 6th. We know that Jason Miller, Trump's senior campaign advisor, told Trump soon after the election he lost. And that didn't matter to Donald Trump. He continued to incite riots and raise money from gullible supporters on the basis of what he knew was a big lie. That's criminal intent.
Harry Litman, we know who the Trump legal team is on the documents case. They've been busy in the special master process and other parts of the case. But there is no Trump legal team that we know of mounting a criminal defense for Donald Trump on the events leading up to January 6th, which we now know is part of the portfolio of the new special prosecutor.
Yeah, that's right. And to the extent he's had counsel, it's been sort of ragtag and in and out. And he's had fairly good counsel now in the Mar-a-Lago. But I think Mar-a-Lago is way more ripe. And moreover, it's more straightforward because, as Andrew Weissman and his colleagues have said in that Just Security memo, you have so much precedent in DOJ where it's happened, and they can say, if Trump isn't above the law, we have to indict here, where just by its nature, January 6th is a really singular event with much less precedent.
Andrew Weissman, Paul Butler, and Harry Litman, thank you very much for joining us on what is an historic night in the history of the investigations of Donald Trump. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, Cassidy Hutchinson testified this week in the criminal investigation of Donald Trump in Georgia, which Special Prosecutor Jack Smith will surely be evaluating for what could be state and federal crimes that would be of interest to the Justice Department. Gwen Keyes-Fleming will join us next.
Rating 2.
I got rapid symptom relief with Rinvoq. Check.
When UC held me back, I got lasting steroid-free remission